I'm Tom DuFore. You're watching Influencing Entrepreneurs with Casimir Ward.
After years of teaching entrepreneurship and consulting business owners, I realized that true knowledge comes from the wins and losses of those entrepreneurs. These are the stories of those business leaders. I'm Casimir Ward, and this is Influencing Entrepreneurs. All right, today I'm here with Dr. Tom DuFore with Big Sky Franchising Team. And I really want to dig into what the franchise world looks like right now. But doctor, you might be our first doctor. Are you doctor of love, doctor of medicine?
Yeah, great question. Not medicine, doctor of business administration, doctor of business. So my doctorate degree in studies all oriented and specialized in business, and really had a specific interest. My doctoral thesis centered around the application of virtue in business and looking at how do you measure an organization's virtuousness is what I studied.
So what was your path to your doctorate? Was it just undergrad, grad, doctorate? What were the bumps in the road?
Oh, great question. Well, it was not direct to it. It was something in undergraduate school. I remember thinking, I think that'd be interesting. It was to pursue a terminal degree, and didn't know what that meant at the time. I guess technically I was a first generation college student, didn't really know what I didn't know. And later it was one of those bucket list items that was on my bucket list, and actually ended up going back later in life. So I finished my degree about 3 years ago. 22 is when I finished. And so 3 years ago, and it was 3 years of probably the hardest work I've ever had to do to get through that. So in between that, I had finished an MBA and really saw this as a fun opportunity to show my kids that, hey, you can pursue and go after your dreams even as you get a little bit older.
Anything that drew you there? Was it faculty, the subject matter?
Yeah. So I looked at dozens and dozens of different programs. There are so many out there today. And there were two driving factors. The first was I really wanted to have faith integration into my school. And so it's a Christian university. And so that was something that I was really looking to incorporate. And then the second piece was when I looked at their business school, they have a framework that they run off of, or a business model called the virtuous business model. And it just gives some applications on the virtues of a virtuous leader and a virtuous organization. And that really just caught my attention as something that intrigued me and helped kind of summarize how I've always tried to do business, is trying to be fair and reasonable. And when you're in business long enough, you bump into folks that are bad actors or unscrupulous or just maybe trying to cut corners sometimes. And so I always thought, well, boy, what if there was a framework that someone like that could have utilized? Or even for myself, when there's a temptation lurking around somewhere, for you to look at and say, hey, maybe I could have a tether here to look at and pull from to help me in making this decision.
Did anybody before you do any work on what you've coined or I'm assuming you coined, the virtuous business model?
So the virtuous business model is through the university. It's a model that they developed. And I created, as part of my thesis, one of the results out of it was I created a scorecard called the Virtuous Organization Scorecard. So as far as I know, it was the first of its kind, from the research and such I did. There may be similar things out there, but it was unique in what I created. And am actually just finishing up a book right now on the virtuous business model to really add some more depth with a couple co-authors that we're finishing here over the next couple months.
So in that virtuous business model scorecard, I want to track well. I put my scorecard. What are some of the metrics I need to be hitting in order to track I don't know if success is the right word, but where I am on the playing field?
Yeah, great question. So the way the virtuous business model is set up is, as an organization, it looks at building 3 different forms of capital. The first is social capital, spiritual capital, and then economic capital. And as an organization, how do you build these? And there are 3 different virtues or values assigned to each of these capital components. And so what I looked at doing was saying, well, every business has different economic indicators or social indicators that are more or less important based on the organization. And so when I looked at evaluating and building it out, I said, well, the idea of being virtuous and having virtue, it's an individual pursuit. Okay. So it's something that the goal is that eventually you don't think about your action. You just react in a virtuous way, or with virtue. That's the whole idea of pursuing this. And it comes after much application and trying and learning. And so what I looked at is to say, well, each organization needs to be tracking on their own. So each leader needs to pull out what are those social capital components that are most important. So, for example, social capital might be, let's look at a net promoter score for our company. What is our current net promoter score? Do we have one? That might be one metric you use to measure your social capital component. You might also look at your turnover rate. How does your turnover rate compare to others in your field or in your industry comparatively? Is it less? What's the average? Is it better? How are you tracking? Kind of a situation. It might also be done through surveys to your staff, to other stakeholders, and social might be employees, your vendors, your suppliers, the 1 or 2 degrees out from your organization, and building those social networks that come along with that. So just some examples that might be important. It might as well be industry recognition, awards that you might receive, or submitting for that. And so it takes a little bit more work for each organization to go through that, but at the end, it now becomes a very crystallized and very specific structure for leadership, as well as the team members to really, I don't want to say buy into, but get behind in terms of taking action, versus some broad brush numbers or what you think is the right thing to do.
Well, that would be kind of one of my concerns or questions on how you deal with it. Is in order for this to do it, leadership has to value this. They do have to buy in and do that. And then it goes from the top down. What are the type of business leaders, or what is the profile of those that really care about stuff like this, that want to do that work? How do we increase sales 5%? They'll invest in that right away.
Yes.
How do we cut margin?
Yes.
7%. They'll invest in that right away. But like when it comes to like, how do we become virtuous, you know?
Yep.
We're kind of riding a wave where the last several years is company culture development has really had its moment.
Yeah.
It seems like after COVID, the call back to office, some of those are getting rolled back a little bit.
Yes.
But good ethics and virtuosity are here to stay, even though they're not always followed. So my question would be is, if we're going to look to get to someone to prescribe to this.
Yes.
What do they look like?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I don't have a terribly great answer, because what I found is the leader of the organization, the CEO, the president, the founder, whomever is at the head of the organization, must, in most situations, they have to be behind this. That person, he or she's got to be the person that is championing this and behind it. Now, one of my co-authors of the book, he actually did this. He worked for a mid-sized firm and actually did this in his own department. So he did this within his department. He was the leader of his department. And after 6 or 12 months of implementing some of his best practices through this model, others in the department, and he was in the accounting department, and if you've ever worked with corporate accounting departments, they don't always have the best reputation. And so...
No, I was born and bred in one.
Yeah. So you understand, exactly. And he found us 6 months to a year after starting to implement this with the staff within that department, and there was some turnover who didn't want to ascribe to these new practices and behaviors. And so there was a little bit of turnover, but not much. And he started getting questions from the C-suite saying, hey, what's going on here? Why is your department nice? We're not getting hollered at. We're getting kind responses back. They're collaborating with us. What's happening? And said, well, this is what I've been implementing and trying. And they said, well, this looks great. Can we do it for the leadership team so that we can also start incorporating that throughout the other departments here? And so anyway, that's just one quick example of what they did. But I guess that question of how do we get buy-in? And there's a longitudinal study that was done over 10 years. It was over a 10-year period that they did this, and they surveyed thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses. And what they looked at was they asked businesses, what is your level of corporate social responsibility? Kind of this idea of giving back, whether that be money, whether that be time in volunteer hours, supporting your staff and team. And for me, this study was really interesting because it looked at businesses that valued these intangible things, giving away money, giving away time, and thinking, well, to your point earlier, well, if it was going to increase sales 5% or cut sales or decrease expenses by 5%, leadership's all in. But what about these other things? And so what this study found was, when I first started reading through this study, I thought, well, this is going to show that these businesses that were doing corporate social responsibility were maybe making more money or less money because it was costing them more time and more resources. And what they found over time, that the overall result was neutral. There was no benefit or not financially. Now, what the study didn't show, which I have a hunch would be the case, that those that were participating in this probably increased their goodwill in their communities and the people they served and their staff and their people. So it'd be interesting to look at turnover rates at these companies and some of these other value-added things to see were there other ripple effects that came out of this that maybe we didn't see.
No, it's kind of that question that you need to ask about your employees and yourself. How do you want your team to feel when they're driving into work? How do you want them to feel on Sunday night? Remember Sunday night in grade school? Oh my God, the worst feeling but we have the same ones with our job, but when it's a place we love, it's just another Sunday night.
Yeah, that's right. And I think about sitting around on that Sunday night, especially now with football season in full force. When I was a kid growing up, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and so we're a Bears fan family, and so a Bears party happened every Sunday. There was a Bears party at somebody's house you'd always end up going to, and inevitably people would be talking about work and this and that. Now I'm in the South, so it's Saturday for the college football. When you're small talking with people, are you saying how much you love the company you work for? Or are you just kind of skipping over that? Oh, how's work? Oh, it's fine. Or is it, oh, I love the company that I work for, or the boss that I have, or the things that we do or stand for? And to your point, to me, if the employees are speaking well about your company, that's a good sign. If they're not saying anything, that's not great. If they're saying negative things, well, that's even worse. And unfortunately, as an employer, you probably don't know about that.
A big part of this is your entrepreneurial journey, because a lot of people that go into academics do not fit the profile to be entrepreneurs. They're more in theory, more in designing knowledge rather than applying it.
Yes.
So where did you find the intersection of an academic into entrepreneur?
Great question. Well, one of the reasons I chose the institution I did is because our final project was an applied doctoral project. So the idea is that it's applied to a real world problem. So the research and what you're doing for the dissertation equivalent, and mine was basically, it was the 4 chapters of a dissertation plus 2 additional chapters, which was basically a leadership or an executive management implementation plan to say, I put together all this research and theory and such, but how do you implement it to solve their problem? And then chapter 6 was a reflection to talk about what were the outcomes, what happened. So it added a little bit extra onto it, but that's one of the reasons I like it, because what does this look like in real world? And so that's one of the things I like about the degree in itself. It's the idea of it's an applied degree there.
So you put all these pieces together. Where does Big Sky Franchise Team come into play?
Yeah, so Big Sky Franchise Team fits into this, as I started the company coming up on almost 10 years ago now. And I've been helping and working primarily with successful small to mid-sized business owners and helping them franchise their business now for about just over 20 years, and started Big Sky 10 years ago. And so I've always had a love for entrepreneurship. I'm very patriotic, and I think, well, what's American? Well, the American dream, coming up with an idea and putting it into practice and creating a business out of that. And so I've always loved that idea of the American dream. I watched my dad as an entrepreneur when I was a kid he was always in the car business. One day, eventually he started his own little used car lot and ran that for over 30 years before he retired. And
Did you ever work that lot? Were you a car salesman?
I did do that. I did help him out in summers. Yeah. Mostly moving cars, washing cars, driving cars to and from the auction. It was a little,
Cutting teeth, moving cars, or you selling cars, I mean?
yeah.
I mean, that you figure that out at a young age. You're set for life. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And I did help him out. I always say he was an honest man in a business that does not have a great reputation. So he really did a nice job in serving his customers. And that's one of the things I loved about franchising is you have a successful entrepreneur that's taken this idea and created this system that's working. And now he says, I want to replicate it. I want to franchise it. And now the franchisees that buy in, they're these what I call these budding entrepreneurs that in most cases, without franchising, probably never start their own business in most cases. So I've always referred to franchising as a confidence elixir for these potential franchise buyers or franchisees or potential entrepreneurs to become a franchisee. And so then they can run their own business with the system that's been developed and sorted out.
So what is the tipping point that gets you to go this route? Like what happens to where you're like, I want to run this business and this is what it's going to be about. Right. What makes you say this is going to be my career, helping them scale to a level of franchise?
And so for me, I knew when I was an undergrad that I wanted to go into business management. I had some faculty that had come in and some adjuncts that worked at the school that were at the business school. I thought, oh, wow, they're a consultant. That sounded cool. And they talked about what they did and they got to teach kind of part-time or full-time. They were kind of doing a little bit of both. I thought, well, that's really interesting. And I took a lot from those teachers and faculty that had both the academic and the real world experience that I could learn from. So I said, oh, management consulting, that sounds great. So I started looking for management consulting jobs. I didn't really know what that meant, but that's what I was looking for. And so I was a business management major. You know, I was a great student. I was a very good student when I was in school. And so my first job just happened to be at a consulting company that specialized in helping companies franchise. It was just by total chance. I fortunately had a mentor in college that had given me the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, the E-Myth Revisited, and said, hey, you got to read this. And so thankfully I had read that. And so I had some familiarity with
it's a gateway drug, E-Myth.
It is.
The marijuana of business books.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so at the time, other than McDonald's and reading that book, that was about all I knew about franchising. And, you know, here has been a couple decades later and have certainly learned a lot, but I don't know if it's chance or that kind of led me there, but fell in love with it, fell in love with being able to serve this client to help them grow their business and expand through franchising.
Excellent. So as you do that, how do you find your first client?
When I launched, a good thing is in consulting and professional services work, you build relationships with people. And so much of the work that I've developed over the years has just been referrals. I mean, like a lot of businesses over time, it's just been somebody who knew somebody who said, hey, you got to talk to Tom. He can at least help you out or give you some pointers. And so that's largely how our business has grown over the last 10 years was just referrals, connections. That's been the majority of the client work that we've been able to catch that's come to us.
What type of industries are you playing with?
So franchising is used in just about any kind of industry you can think about. Most people are familiar with franchising when they think of restaurants and retail and hotel or lodging. You think of brands like a McDonald's, a Jimmy John's, and you think of some various kinds of retailers or Holiday Inn, some of these well-known franchise brands. But the largest segment today is actually services. That is the largest number of franchisors that are out there. And when you think of painting franchises or window washing franchises, mosquito franchises, right? All of these different brands, many of them, you think about these brands, these home services, and it has been the number one category in franchising since around about August of 2020. COVID hit, people are sitting in their homes and they're looking out the window seeing, you know, the lawn service company come, the painting contractor, the tree trimmer coming through. And they say, well, holy cow, there's a business here. These folks are all working. And it's been the number one category for 5 years now in franchising in terms of just number of leads, number of interest coming into it.
So do you have a client and you don't have to say the client's name if you
Yeah.
don't want, but like an industry or something, you're like, this is why we do what we do. This was a home run.
Yeah, great question. My favorite success stories in franchising are the brands that we start with. Most of our clients have one, two, three of something that they're working with. And my favorite success stories are the brands you've probably never heard of, but they now have 15, 25, 50, 100 franchises. One brand we worked with a few years ago is called Shoe Beauty. It's an eyebrow threading brand. It's a brand most people have probably never heard of, but they have over 100 locations right now and growing across the country. And who knew, right? I always think that's an interesting one. It's something that it's like, really, eyebrow threading? Who would ever think that?
To show my ignorance,
Yeah.
what is eyebrow threading? I have something in my head that may be way off base.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. It's basically getting their eyebrows done. It's just using these threads that it's basically literally an eyebrow threading, just like it's a specific kind of thread. I don't understand all the intricacies of it, but basically think of sewing something. It's using some threads and they just kind of roll it across. Instead of waxing or plucking, they do this eyebrow threading.
What about some of the ideas or the businesses you've worked in that you're like, oh, this is a home run. This will be all over the place that just didn't make it over the hump?
After being in this industry for about, 5 or 7 years, I stopped giving up on trying to guess the next winner or the next big thing, because pretty much everything that I thought was going to be this next huge trend or this massive success, it likely had some success, but not what I had envisioned. And other brands where I thought, this is just okay. It took, and they take off. I can give a couple of quick examples. One early on in my career, this is dating things a little bit, but the eBay drop-off stores, if you remember the eBay drop-off stores. And so in my business, we see trends really early because you get these new ideas and entrepreneurs starting it, and they might only have one or two, but they see, because they're on the ground level, they see that the customers are coming in, people are loving this. And so I remember working on a project and said, well, that's interesting. The eBay drop. Who's going to do that? Why would you ever go and do that? I said, is that really going to work? And then, it was maybe a year later, another similar type of brand came through and did that. And both of them ended up selling, I think, 100 plus franchises in a few short years. I thought, holy smokes, this is amazing. I was a junior consultant on this project. So I was not a lead consultant, but I was a junior consultant at the time. And I worked with Marco's Pizza, the original family that had come through. And I remember seeing them and, they had a successful pizza operation. And they're like, yeah, we're going to grow. This is what we're going to do. And I thought, well, that's really cool. But, it's like, how many pizza concepts can there really be? And yet, now here they are, one of the largest in the whole country. And those are some amazing things when you look back and say, well, that's an amazing story, and in an industry that you think, well, is it saturated? And yet, here comes another pizza concept, or what Five Guys has done, and kind of this whole smash burger thing, and those that follow suit.
Yeah. So, you spend a lot of time helping businesses, go in. I'm assuming you're helping everything from process development to refinement and all that. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
It's a yes and no. So our goal in the work we do for our clients is we take them through 3 steps when we help them franchise. The first step is all driven on strategy, things like figuring out franchise fees and royalties, territory structure. What's the whole structure of the franchise look like?
So the definition of the product that you're selling, like the product as a franchise.
You got it. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And we call that our franchise blueprint. And to kind of describe that idea, right? What's the blueprint that we're going to be selling to someone else, essentially? And then once that's put together, step 2 is the documentation of that. So things like manuals, you need your legal documents. So we get them connected with a great franchise attorney, and marketing plan to attract buyers, and marketing collateral for prospective franchise buyers. But the manual piece is one that comes up a lot to say, well, are you going to fix my operations for me? That comes up a lot. And in our line of work, our goal is not to change what's working, because the founder has figured out a system and a methodology, which that's why we do the blueprint first, is to validate the financials, the metrics. Is this working out? Do we think it'll work for someone else? And then we're going to document those processes so then it can be taught and trained to someone else on how to run it. Step 3 then is implementation. It's just looking at the next step. So we've got a small team here, boutique team that we help folks through. So we just let them know that, hey, we're going to give you consulting and guidance along the way. And it's just part of the package. You're not going to get charged any extra for it. And then our franchise sales training workshop, we actually just ran one here about a week or so ago. And it's a 7-hour training program. It comes with a 160-page workbook. And it's not to teach someone how to be a master salesperson, but the franchise sales process is different. You're selling a business opportunity. It's a very different franchise sale. There's a lot of legal regulation and requirements around that. And so in franchising is very similar. There are a lot of rules and regulations around it. And the attorneys are great at scaring new franchisors about, what they can and can't say, which is great. You need that piece of it. And then our training is geared around saying, okay, well, now that all of these rules exist, here's how you play on the field so that you can play and do what you need to do appropriately within those guidelines, within those rules.
So, you get to be somewhat of an expert understanding the structure of all these companies and what they're selling and trying to replicate that.
Yes.
However, in this type of industry, how is it running your own business? What are some of the challenges you have running the Big Sky franchise team?
Yeah, sure. I would say our challenges are probably not any different than most, right? It's looking at one is lead generation, right? And sales conversions, pretty straightforward, and making sure those appointments, leads are coming in the door. For service business, you're looking maybe at appointment set or leads versus a retail might be, number of people coming in, average ticket sale, that kind of thing. And then managing staff. Our team, we run a fully remote team. We've been remote since, I guess, before it was in vogue or cool to do. Yeah. We've been remote since we launched. And that's how I've always run the business so that people can, for our staff and team. And so a big thing for us as our team has grown is saying, well, how can we make our remote team feel like we work in the same office together? How can it feel like we still have that, quote, water cooler talk without an actual water cooler to be going to, or a coffee machine? And then I would say the last big thing has been the adoption and integration of corporate values and culture. And it is a buzzword. We met through podcasts, right? And having you on our show and vice versa here. But, one thing that I found is that there are companies that talk about culture and values and companies that really incorporate that into their practices and policies. And it's hard to tell who does and who doesn't. And when we launched ours, we were definitely a brand that we talked about it, but were we really doing it? And I would say, we were just kind of half-heartedly trying to do it. But right before COVID, we made a commitment, and I decided to make a commitment to say, we're going to run all of our decisions, especially our big decisions, through our values that we talk about. And we're going to really be committed to these. And we're going to run it through our purpose statement and say, is this congruent with what we say we're trying to do here? And if there's an incongruence, what do we need to change about the decision? Or do we just need to say no or not pass on whatever that decision happens to be? And so that's when we really, really saw a big change for our company and an organization.
As you do that, how do you spend your time as the CEO now? Where are you? Are you on the sales side? Are you on the ops side? Are you everywhere in between?
Yeah, we're a small business. We've got 12 of us here. And so most of my time is spent as, I guess, the front man of the band, as I kind of describe it, being present on shows like yours, running our own content creation through our own podcasts and webinars that we run to try to educate our community, and then interfacing as the customer service, I guess, or senior consultant for most of our client projects that we're working through. But I love the work that I do and serving the clients that we work with and helping them get to where they want to go.
So looking at your background, you talked about culture, we talked about virtue, we talked about you as a leader and how you keep your employees engaged. Let's have our own little water cooler talk.
Okay.
All right, we're around there. What's going on? What are you going to throw at me that's part of your life right now that's not work related?
Well, I have 3 kids. I have a 9th grader, an 8th grader, and a 6th grader. and they are all active in stuff. So outside of work, it is a busy household of running to and from practices and events and performances and games. I coach my boys' baseball teams. So that is, sometimes it's, funny. Half the time I find myself waking up in the middle of the night, it's thinking about the batting lineup for the tournament game or for the next game that we're playing. And so it's fun to be a part of that. I played a lot of men's league softball and did that.
That's where we all retire to. Yeah. Got to bring this up. Ascending records.
Oh my goodness. You did your homework.
My researchers pulled it all up to look at it. I'm going to let you tell it rather that way as not a got you.
You did your homework. Well, kudos to you and your team for that. So Ascending Records is a record label I started in, I guess it's roughly 20 years ago, roughly somewhere around there. I'd have to look back. But again, this was kind of a bucket list item. I was a singer-songwriter. I was in music I was in sports, and then in high school slowly converted into choir and learned to play the guitar and started singing, songwriting, and doing that kind of stuff. And so I always wanted to write an album. I said, well, I better set a goal to do it. Otherwise, I'm never going to do it. And so I set a bucket list item to do that and had an opportunity, I guess, the driver for my doctorate degree. I said, well, you know what? I want to be able to say to my kids, hey, if you've got a dream and you want to do something, go and do it. You can figure it out. If there's a will, there's a way. You can figure out a way to make it happen. And so that's what I did. I've got literally 1,000 CDs in my basement,
promo code influencing entrepreneurs. Go. We're going to let them, they're going to start flying off the shelves.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. I always joke that my mom, my mother-in-law, and my aunt are about the only people who bought a copy for, $10 or whatever it was at the time. But,
Did you ever play live or anything? Or it was just like, I wanted to have this?
When I was in college at the university, hey, live music or a performance venue. Sure. Yeah, I did, but not much. And I was never a headliner. Put that out there. Just big surprise.
Excellent. So as we kind of bring things to a close here, Tom,
yeah,
what is one of the best pieces of advice you've gotten that's really served your entrepreneurial journey?
I would say the best piece of advice I've received was from my first mentor. I met him, I was, 19 when I started with him. And he was a very successful entrepreneur, had built a business, sold it for 8 figures or more. I mean, he really built a great enterprise. And his philosophy on business as usual was, if it ain't broke, break it. That was his mantra. And what he meant by that was, something's working really, really well. How can you look at it and try and think about, one, how is this eventually going to break? What might break it? Also to look at disruptions or threats that might be coming along. Most entrepreneurs that we're helping franchise have gone outside of the box. They've broken the mold of the standard business as usual thing and found a new way, a new process, a new strategy, a new approach to business, and have found success in it.
Well, in all of that and all the companies you help, how do you want to be remembered?
I would say for my clients and the people I work with, I would say I think I am close to this and would want to be remembered as a person who joyfully supports their endeavors and whatever that might be. So coming along with joy to take a positive approach and help them problem solve and find a solution or get to where they want to go. Our number one value that we talk about at our company is win-win relationships. So finding the win-win, where's the win-win, and helping them see that and find it, and looking through the lens of viewing things as a relationship, not just transactional. There is a transaction going to happen in business, of course. Money's going to get exchanged, contracts are going to get signed, but it's the relationship that sticks around. That's what people, I think, are likely going to remember most of us by, and that's how I hope and clients will remember and working with me as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, our conversations have definitely been win-win from my side, so I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate you telling all your story and taking the time to be here with us today, Dr. Tom.
Well, I guess thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. To watch more episodes of Influencing Entrepreneurs, be sure to subscribe on YouTube at Nexagy Education.